she's 9 months. Let's go.
Exactly. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome. If you haven't been joining us in here, we've been having a good time here as we get rock and rolling for our Mass Media Podcast Mastermind. And as always, thank you for joining us on a Wednesday evening as we do these lives. If you're watching the replays, thank you as always for watching, whether it's on YouTube or any of the social media live streaming. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much. Make sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe. And as always, check out our website, massmediamastermind.com, and you can download our free monetization and sponsorship checklist for free. But we are really honored tonight, we didn't know if she would be making it, who knows, but we are honored to have our very special guest and my friend Elyse Archer. I can't pronounce the last name. I know you've got a different last name since you've been married, Elyse, so I apologize I didn't write it down here for you, but you are
this is why I haven't taken
say, what was that, Elyse? Sorry.
Oh, so this is why I haven't taken my husband's last name, because no one can pronounce it. So I just roll with Archer. It's good. We're good.
Right,
we're good. You did it right.
Okay, perfect there.
Yeah.
I would have butchered it otherwise. But if you guys don't know Elyse or follow her, she is somebody you definitely want to do, who's doing an amazing job at everything she does. She's a visibility coach for purpose-driven leaders whose insights have been featured in major media, including Forbes and Inc.com. She's a keynote speaker and host of the podcast Instant Impact with Elyse Archer. You got to go check that out. So she's a fellow podcaster doing some amazing things, and she shares best practices from top business leaders all across the country and the world. And so we're honored to have Elyse join us here on a Mass Media Mastermind. She was a previous guest on our Note Closer show, and just honored to have you back on here tonight. So welcome. Yes, she is expecting on the final phases, so she's got to bug out. Hey, she's got to bug out to take care of the little one. But hey, Elyse, welcome to tonight's call.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm so glad to be here. I don't think baby will come in within the next however long we're talking, but yeah, if I'm just settling out, then it's been real, and wish me luck.
We won't have a live delivery.
I think we'll be good.
Exactly.
Yeah, this will maybe be your top rated episode. Better than you would like.
Well, let's dive into this, because you've been a podcasting for a while, and you are just killing it on LinkedIn, doing some great stuff with branding and asking questions and really engaging with your audience over there. And we'll get to that in a second. But with so many podcasters out there, podcasts being launched, we're over the million, podcast mark, that came out a month or two ago. A lot of them are being released because everybody's being stuck at home. I'm seeing a lot. I'm sure you're seeing a lot. Let's dive in. What are some of the things that kind of make you just go, oh, just kind of slap your head and said, you should have done a little bit better with this? What are some of the pet peeves you see from people that aren't doing a good job with their brand or their visibility, and it just kind of drives you bonkers?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so in terms of brand or visibility, and I can kind of speak to podcasting maybe specifically for this audience. I think one of the challenges that we see with people's brands, especially when it's a personal brand, is a lot of times you'll look and see, major influential people in your space, and I'll use the personal development space as an example. Like, let's say you look up to maybe, Tony Robbins, or, I would even say like Gary Vee's kind of in that space, and you see them talking about everything in their brand. You see them talking about finances and family and health and fitness. And so you think, well, okay, if they're doing it, then that's the way that I'm going to get to that level too. And it's not so much it's like anyone's fault that they're doing this. I think it's just a misconception about the way that you can really rise to the top of your class and your space. Is you need to be really, really specific on what your show is all about, who it's for. Like, be okay with being narrow for some time, so that you can end up being that big fish in the small pond, and then continue to grow and expand from there. And I even think about, what you've done with Note Closer Show. It's like you've built such an influential brand in a very specific space, and built a strong brand name in that space because of it, because you didn't try to be all things to all people. So I think if you're looking for fast growth or for faster growth, see how you can progressively become the big fish in the small pond, and then jump into the next one, and then jump into the next one. But specificity, being clear on what problem you solve, who you solve it for, having a very unique lens and angle on the topic you're speaking to, that'll get you there faster.
It makes a lot of sense out there. Definitely, as we've always said, it's better to be the riches are in the niches if you're looking to monetize at some point, or to add sponsors later on down the road after you've been doing it for a little while. As you talk about being specific, let's dive into you talk about identifying an audience, and as the avatar is often used. Let's kind of talk about some of the things you need to look for in an avatar and kind of your audience, because that will ultimately help you kind of identify the brand, and if you can be visible or be on a platform where your listeners or your followers are at, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I'm working with a client, we actually do it a little bit reverse. I think a lot of times people will say, okay, figure out your brand message. And then it's like, who's the client? And then what's the business model going to be? We actually figure out really a couple key questions that help uncover who the audience is. So you want to look at questions first, like what's your positioning? So I think you and I may have gone through this on your podcast, but it'll maybe be helpful for this audience. We use an exercise we call the brand DNA helix to help uncover your uniqueness and then which audience you're best equipped to serve. And it's a series of 6 different questions that help uncover your unique personal brand DNA, knowing that each of us, just like we each have our own unique genetic DNA, also has our own unique brand DNA. And so the questions are, first, what problem do you solve? So getting really clear all the way down to one word. What's that one word problem? Kind of like when somebody says, I'm really struggling with debt and I want to get out of debt. Most likely the person they're going to recommend is, hey, you need to go listen to Dave Ramsey's show, or you need to go get his books. The balancing question to that is, what are you passionate about? So think about what lights you up, what gives you joy, what ticks you off. Those 2 questions combined are going to help inform what you want your messaging to be, what you want your positioning to be in the marketplace. The second set of questions is more about, what are you qualified to speak about? So we look at, first, what have you studied and researched? So, what did you go to school for? What do you read books on? What do you have certifications on? And then the balancing question to that, though, is, what have you earned the right to talk about? Because you've seen this, I've seen this. There's a lot of people online teaching you today how to become an internet millionaire, and you're looking at their stuff and you're like, I know you're recording that from your mom's basement. Like, I know you rented the Lambo, and they've never done it themselves. So we're big believers in speak from a place of integrity. Like, look at what's your superpower? What do you do better than anybody else? What challenges have you overcome? What are your strengths? What are your results in your own life? And then the final set of questions is about your business model. How are you going to monetize based upon what you enjoy, how much money you want to make? And so we look at 2 things there. The first is, what would people be willing to buy from you? And one of the things I think our clients learn quickly is we use a lot of acronyms at Brand Builders Group. We love a good acronym. So we look at something we call the PAIDs, the 5 different ways you can get paid from your personal brand. So you look at products, right? So books, t-shirts, etc. Ads and affiliates, which I think would very much be like the podcaster model in a lot of ways. So building a big audience, people will pay to be in front of it. Information, whether it's a membership, a mastermind, a course. Deals, so like brand deals, getting your brand to a certain point, and then a brand will pay you to partner with them. Or the final is services, coaching, consulting, speaking, training. And then the balancing question of that, though, is, what business do you want to be in? So how do you want to be spending your time? And we run any business model through a checklist we call the DARES, DARES. And the more of these you can check off, the more time freedom you're going to have in your business. So with what you're building and how you're planning on scaling, is it digital? Is it automated? Is it recurring? Is it evergreen? And is it scalable? So digital, automated, recurring, evergreen, scalable. You will probably not find a business that checks all 5 of those boxes. That's basically saying you would build a business that requires no humans, is totally automated, can scale forever. You never have to touch it. We think Netflix is close, but it's still not quite there. But here's why I bring that up, Scott, when you ask about audience, is that once you're clear on that, that will tell you who the right audience is for what you have to offer. If the way you're going to monetize is, a $10,000 a year coaching program, your audience is going to be probably different than if you're selling like a $7 ebook. Maybe not, right? Maybe they kind of stack together, but getting really clear on how are you going to monetize and build the business, and that will then inform the audience that you want to speak to. And then with the audience, it's probably, I would imagine, most of your community has gone through some of these exercises, but if they haven't, they're useful to go through. I mean, you want to look at demographics and psychographics of your ideal audience. I think one of the exercises we have our clients do that's really helpful is make a list of the 52 different questions your ideal client would have in relation to your product, your industry, your service, And that can become your content for a year. Like once you're clear on who that person is, you make that list of 52 questions. Every week, you just either answer it in your podcast or answer it in a social media video. You're good. So that was a really long answer to the question.
But it was great. Hopefully, I think we only missed Y and Z in there as far as letters and the different
right.
things like that. But that's a beautiful thing. It allows people to understand that. We've got different people watching tonight in different organizations, guys. So if you're got some questions, feel free to type them in the chat roll. We'll try to get to them as we go throughout. But I wanted to ask you, can there be a niche that's maybe too small, an audience, at least if people are trying to target, or is there a number they try to look at with their demographics or audience size that works well to kind of start off with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Here's what I will say is, I have yet to have a client focus on too small of a niche. I think usually it's the opposite. And with that being said, it's making sure that what you have to offer is actually really relevant for that person and for that individual. So like right now, I'm as I go on maternity leave, I'm actually planning a new brand launch. And right now I'm just in the middle of ideal client interviews, talking with people who I think I can serve in this, to say like, is this something you would buy? How much would you buy it for? What do you think would be like, what would you want to see in it? And I'm refining and getting clearer and clearer on who that person is as I talk. So I'm sure you could get specific enough that there's like one person on earth. And if that's the case, then, then you're probably gonna want to expand a little bit. But I think most people have the opposite problem. I have yet to see someone focus in too small.
Yeah, I agree that there's weird disorders or other weird one-off aspects of things, I guess you can get too small, but I think there's enough of an audience out there, and just finding out where your audience is hanging out and how to connect with them is one of the biggest things. But one of the things that you have done really, really well is your LinkedIn strategy. And I think LinkedIn is overlooked by a lot of podcasters. I think it's the hottest thing around. I think the one thing LinkedIn has kind of dropped the ball on with all this coronavirus is not releasing LinkedIn Live to more people,
Yeah.
But why don't we can we talk a little bit about your strategy there and how you're using that to help you build your brand and your visibility out there? Because you're just doing it's like the first thing I see in the morning when I'm scrolling through LinkedIn is like, oh, there's Elyse, you and Megan McKinnon, and Gary Vaynerchuk. You three are like I'm like, man, another great stuff. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Awesome. I like it. I'm in good company. Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn has been the #1 driver of my business ever since I went into business for myself in 2015. So I think there's a couple key things to your LinkedIn strategy, and I'll share what works for me, and people can take the best and leave the rest. Video on LinkedIn I think this is something that people are getting more and more now, but you can get great organic engagement on your videos on LinkedIn. So when I put a video on LinkedIn versus YouTube versus Instagram versus Facebook, it always performs best on LinkedIn. I get way more views, way more engagement. And that's really been the biggest driver of leads for my business since I left corporate years ago. Here's the thing, and here's the quote unquote strategy is, I think on LinkedIn, the key is that it's always the fortune's in the follow-up. So let's say that you start putting out your content on LinkedIn and you're consistent. Maybe you're like answering one of those 52 questions every single week. And just doing like a video that answers the question, relatively short video. Videos typically between 1 and 3 minutes perform best on LinkedIn, but sometimes I have a hard time keeping it to 3 minutes, as you could probably tell. I get excited and then I just go.
I think you're
they
okay.
still
I think
do okay.
you that 10-minute mark though. We'll just say up to 10 minutes. How's that sound? Let you slide.
Right. Yeah. Well, the good news with LinkedIn is at 10 minutes, they cap you. You can't do a video for any longer. So you do have some parameters in there. But here's what'll happen as you start putting out more relevant content is you'll start to get more connection requests. And this has been the biggest driver of leads for my business, is noticing like when I put out a video, it varies, right? I've gotten just a couple new connection requests from ideal clients from it, or I've gotten like upwards of 200 connection requests from one video from ideal clients. And I think what most people miss in that is they won't accept connection requests from people they don't know. And to me, that's like going to a networking event and only talking to the people who you know, which may make you feel comfortable, but you're not going to get any new clients out of it. Or they'll just go in and they'll accept all of them and they won't ask why people reached out. So here's the thing, when people are sending you a connection request not all of them, some of them are not qualified, but a percentage of them are reaching out and connecting with you because they're following your content and they like what you have to say and it's relevant to a goal they're looking to accomplish. So I kind of just stumbled into this by accident years ago when I was starting to put out this content and get more connection requests. And it was people who were really my ideal customers. And I was like, I'm just curious why they're reaching out. So I started sending a follow-up message when I would accept. And it was very simple, but it was something along, it would be like, hey, Scott, thank you so much for sending the connection request. I'm curious what prompted the request. If there's anything, would love to hear about what's going on for you in your business right now. If there's any way I can help, I'd love to be of service. And what I found in sending that message is that there was a decent number of people who were connecting with me who would then write back and say, yeah, you know, I've been following your videos on either sales process or personal branding. I'm actually looking to hire someone in that area right now, and I thought you might have some good ideas. And I was like, they were never going to tell me that if I hadn't reached out and had the conversation. So I could then take that and convert it into a sales opportunity and sign a new client. But in all social media, it's always follow up with your new followers and connection requests to find out why they're there, why they're following you. And there's usually just untapped gold mines in there for you, that you can start building your pipeline that way. So if somebody's looking for like a free, easy, simple funnel in their business, it's content specifically on LinkedIn, I'm a fan of, and then that follow-up strategy. And then you reach the point where your volume of incoming connection requests is so high that, you know, you have your assistant or somebody manage that for you and send that initial message. But then you can go in there and follow up depending on the opportunity. So that's how I convert my content into actual money on LinkedIn, and it works great.
I absolutely, you know, it's amazing what happens when you ask one more question, right? Hey, how'd you come across me? What prompted you to connect? It really does. Ask that question to take that relationship from just a like or a follow to really, truly interaction. You may, and I'm willing to bet you're not a big fan of bots out there either, right?
There's so many of them right now. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm getting, it's like the 10 of the same message every day from different people. It's so annoying, but no, I'm not.
Got a question here from you, from our one of our guests on here. She's Dr. Karen Wilkes Starks asked the question, how do you really find out what your target market wants, likes, their hobbies, reading habits, or the questions, problems that they'd pay to solve? Is there a place to go to get this information online, or just asking?
Yeah, great question. Great. And was it Dr. Carolyn? Did I hear that right?
Yes, Dr. Karen Wilkes Starks.
Okay, yeah, a great question. So I think part of it when you're identifying target market, I personally take a two-pronged approach. So part of it is creating your ideal market. So a lot of times when I'm working with somebody, they're either looking to pivot into a new industry or they're looking to expand in front of a new market. And having kind of that abundance mindset that there's a lot of different people out there who could be your ideal client. When I'm first working with a client, we really sit down and just say, hey, for your ideal client, what would their likes be? What would their interests be? What questions would they have? How much would they pay for this? And oftentimes your clients are going to be like you. Your ideal clients are going to be like you. So you're going to have a sense of who that person is just from knowing your own personal experience. So you get to really define. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, especially if we're pivoting, well, my old clients, you know, made this much money, liked this and that, wanted to do business with me in this way. But there's a reason why you're reevaluating right now. So it's almost just removing the restrictions and saying, if I could just create my dream client out of thin air, what would their answers to these questions be? So I think that's the first step. And then it doesn't hurt to also balance that sometimes with reaching out and talking to people, like I mentioned, I'm doing with just to kind of solidify the model that I'm building out for this new business, is just reaching out. I sent LinkedIn messages to, maybe the new brand is specifically for women. So maybe like 40 different women on LinkedIn who I thought would be my ideal client. I'm just having conversations with them now, finding out like, what are your biggest pain points and what do you struggle with? And if you landed on my website, what words would catch your eye right away? And what would make this type of a program irresistible for you? In terms of online resources, there's a couple things that I like that just help with content ideas. One is answerthepublic.com, which is obviously you probably use that, Scott, you're familiar.
I was thinking, I hope she brings that up. And yep, sure enough, it's a great website.
You may have some, so chime in it because you probably have other tools too. That one is great, right? Because you just go in and you type in a topic and it gives you all the different questions people are searching online related to it. Keywords Everywhere, I think, is also a good one where it's just a little free extension you can put in your Google Chrome browser. You type in a question and then it'll show you like, here's how many people are actually searching for that every month. Here are other searches, here's the search volume. So those are some good tools to help kind of back up and supplement either like the brainstorming you're doing and then the conversations you're having with your target market.
That's good stuff. I like going to Amazon, and if I'm typing in a specific book, what other recommendations does Amazon give me? Or people also list the, watch this, or they downloaded this, or they purchased that. So that kind of gives me an idea of similar interests or similar discussions or similar authors to talk to if I need to bring on an author for something,
I've never thought of that. That's a great idea.
Hey, every once in a while I have an idea. There we go. Good stuff.
Yeah, I love it. It's
hard to believe that, the $1 trillion man, as some people like to bash Bezos, Amazon really is becoming its own search engine, if you think about it, with people looking to see what things are cost or the work or the Amazon business is going to become its own, economy of scale, I guess you say, or even global kind of economy that people can look at and see what's going on and what others are reaching out there. So I use that. And I also like to see what, if people I'm following, see what other like groups they're a part of on Facebook or other meetup groups they're a part of, if I'm connected with them on Meetup as well, to see what other interests people have.
That's a great, that's a great idea. There's so many different resources. And I think the thing is too, it's like, give yourself a deadline. Say, I'm giving myself X amount of time to do this research, and then I'm putting it out there, right? Because I think we can also get so bogged down and so caught up in, I have to have every answer to every question lined up before I can start marketing this. You're going to get so much good feedback when you launch too, that, give yourself, like, I've given myself 2 weeks for these interviews. That's it. Then I got to move forward, and I can tweak as I go. But I think setting that deadline on it too, because there are so many good resources. You could spend like a year, doing the research, and by the time you're done, what you put together isn't relevant or somebody else has done it. So having those boundaries while you're using those great tools, I think, is really key.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You definitely want to try to be, it's best to be first to market versus perfect to market, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where, with everything you've been dealing with and going through the pivot, what's been the biggest surprise resource? Because you said you're launching something new, and an interesting time to be launching something new for you with everything you got going on, which is great. What were some of the steps besides identifying, reaching out to people? A lot of people worry about, I got to have the perfect website, or I got to have the perfect logo, especially in podcasts. I got to have the perfect show art. How important is that kind of that visual stuff compared to kind of answering the questions or really hitting the nail on the head for your listeners?
Yeah, the visual stuff is important. So that I think today we live in a very visual world. We're used to like connecting with people in a thumbnail. We're used to making judgments about whether we want to read what somebody has to say based on the picture they put on their Instagram post. And are we going to, are we interested enough to read the caption from that? So I think yes, the visual is important. And what I see most people do is when they're launching something new, jumping immediately into the visual, and they'll miss some of the foundational work that helps inform the visual and make the visual really powerful for the brand. So there's a couple of steps that I would take when I'm first launching something new before the visual. And the first is really, I would compare the whole process to like building a house, where if you went and you tried to just start building your dream house, and you're like, well, I think it's going to look like this, so I'm just going to put the foundation here, then I'm going to start putting, the framing here and siding here. You and I both know that would go terribly at the end. Like, it's never going to come together. You're going to have to tear it down. You're going to have to rebuild it. You're going to have to spend more time and more money and resources redoing it than if you had just gotten the blueprint in the first place. So have the discipline to do the first step, which is getting the blueprint for what you're building. So really looking at, in terms of the brand and the business, some of the questions we already looked at. So those 6 questions in the brand DNA helix are going to really help. But knowing the problem you solve, your message, your positioning, who the audience is that you're serving, what the business model is, because that's going to inform what the brand looks like, right? Like with the new brand that I'm launching, one of the things that I know about this woman who I'm going to be working with is that she is spiritual, and that is a little bit different in the space that she's in. So as I'm now working with a logo designer, we can incorporate that element into the logo, and I'm having fun with that. And it's different than if I didn't know that about this person. And I'm going to create something that is going to draw in the woman for me, and it's going to repel a lot of women where it's like, that's just not their thing, and that's okay. So I think getting clear on that foundation first, and then with the visual, like making sure that, I think your next step there is what's our visual identity. So what are the colors we're going to be using for the brand? What are the brand guidelines? Actually building out like a set of brand guidelines. These are our fonts. This is our color scheme. This is how you use the logo. This is how you don't use it. Even one thing I usually have clients do before launch is, creating the bumpers for their videos, the intro and outro, creating social media templates, like really just, when I'm working with a client, I like to help them build a skyscraper. It's like, we're not building a flimsy brand, we're building something really solid. So doing that disciplined work at the beginning it does take more time, but it's important if you want to build something really big, because that first impression with the visual representation and with being able to speak directly to your audience through that, I think is important. But get your blueprint first, then you can start building your skyscraper.
Well, but you hit something really good on the head. I want people to realize here. You said something before about the 52 questions that you can answer. That takes some time. And then taking and creating, some of the social media posts or the templates, whether it's through Canva or Pixabay or something like that, that takes some time. But it helps you really kind of build that uniform message along the way. So it's not looking very ad hoc-y. It all kind of falls in line, and it starts building that brand. Like if we look at Golden Arches McDonald's or the swoosh of Nike, it's not just the logo, it starts building the identity. A great example I would say is we do a lot of email blasts out to asset managers. We pull bank asset managers and we'll drop an email out once a week. Well, I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And now I find out from more than one asset manager that they say, oh yeah, we look for the green emails because I have green in my brand. I'm like, okay, that works for me. You think money, think of me, but it's building that template. It's the same thing. They know what to look for. And a lot of people just don't want to put that extra work in. It really, it's not as difficult as they think it's going to be, because once they get into it, a lot of things will kind of, those dominoes will fall relatively quickly as they start getting better at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it can take as long or as short as you want it to, depending on how focused you're willing to be on it at the time. So, for a lot of people I'm working with, like, let's say it's more of a side hustle thing. And they're doing something else full time, and they don't necessarily have a ton of resources to invest in outsourcing it. And, they're maybe getting strategy from us, but aside from that, they're trying to do it all on their own. To go from having nothing, like I had a client recently go from having nothing to launching a best-selling book in a year. And he's got his new brand out. He's got a top-ranked podcast now. I think that's a reasonable time frame if you're kind of going at a steady pace. Now, I've also had clients come in where they have the money to invest in outsourcing stuff to a team to get it done quickly. And they're willing to go all in and focus on it. You can turn it around in a couple months. It just depends on what your priorities are. But either way, taking the time to get the ducks in a row, because whenever you launch your brand, that's one of the few opportunities you get to create a lot of buzz and excitement around what you're doing and get a lot of eyeballs all at once. So there's a whole launch strategy that I work with my clients on to maximize those opportunities. But when you do it, you want to make sure that you've created something that people are going to be excited about and talking about, and it's just that foundational work at the beginning that's going to help set you up for success.
It all is in the work, a 4-letter word that most people don't want to spend time on. But in today's world, it's gotten so much easier to find resources, whether it's bringing on VAs or hiring somebody on Upwork to kind of help with put some individual stuff in, or finding so many cheaper resources than it used to be 5, 10, 15 years ago in doing a launch, right, Elyse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many great resources. You can be super scrappy with it. It doesn't have to take a lot of money. And one thing I'll say too, to your point of it is work, is I think you want to be really intentional, especially if you're launching your own thing, about, does this light my soul on fire?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this something that when I think about doing, it doesn't feel like work? And I have poured, just in my own experience, I have poured so much time and energy and hours into really building other people's dreams. And I know the feeling, like, that can be tiring, and that can, it's not the same reward. But when you're launching your own thing, really paying attention to, like, can I not stop thinking about this? Is this all consuming to me? Is this something that I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, and I'm like jotting down notes on my phone, or because it is time. But for me, when I'm doing this stuff now with the new brand, it's actually energizing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's my soul's purpose right now. And I think that's something we just all want to be mindful of when we're creating something in the world. Because I've created plenty of things where I did it because I thought it was going to bring in X amount of money, or because I thought it was, what, quote unquote, what people needed, but it wasn't actually aligned with what I love at my core. And that's been one of the biggest lessons for me, is just paying attention to, what am I going to love spending time on? Because you're going to be spending the time on it, but it's not going to feel so hard if it's really aligned with who you are at your core.
Yeah, that's so true. I think everybody's done that, where we've worked jobs that we didn't enjoy. We hated getting up. Everybody had a case of the Mondays on a Friday. Last thing you want to do when you're launching, or working on your brand is feeling that way as well. And I think everybody goes through that at some point. You've been doing it long enough. You're just like, okay, I need to take some step away and kind of come back and reevaluate my true passions and feelings, and go from there. You've mentioned a little bit earlier on, talking about, especially the new branch, in the ideal woman. It's okay for people to say no to people that aren't their ideal clients. Can we agree to that?
Oh my gosh, yes. You don't want you don't want everybody. And actually, this is something great I learned from my coach early on, is just making an ideal client requirement checklist, and really thinking about, especially if you're doing some kind of like service work where you're actually going to be talking with people and interfacing with people, what are my requirements for a client? What does their mindset need to be? What does their financial house need to look like? Am I willing to deal with, like, chasing people down for money? Or is that something that I'm just not available for? What do they value? How do they treat me? And making that checklist, so that, let's say that maybe you are in a business model where you're having discovery calls or sales calls. Like, when I'm talking to a client, I'm also thinking about, do I want to be spending time with this person? Because I've taken on clients where I did not want to spend time with them after the fact. And sometimes you don't know until you're in it. But if you're conscious enough during the process of creating the brand, and then also those conversations with people, if you're being honest with yourself. So it needs to be as much a match where they are so lit up by what you're doing, and that's because you've been really clear about who you are and what you're all about and what you stand for and what's a yes and what's a no for you, as you are lit up about them and serving them. So it has to be that win-win. And that's when you get, I think, that really cool creative synergy between you and the people you're serving.
I love it. I love it. I love it. A question for you. In this world of today, with the craziness of social media and trolls and things like that, what's your counsel to give somebody out there with their brand when they've got some of those that have jumped on or bash or don't have the best things to say, or just try to find a way to bring you down? What's some of your advice to those that are listening or watching this on, A, maybe to ignore those if you can, but B, how to kind of deal with that aspect when it comes to your brand?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is celebrate, because you don't get those until you've reached a certain point of influence. I mean, like, your friends probably aren't going to leave really nasty comments on your stuff. If your friends and family, unless maybe you need some new friends, that means you've reached a point where strangers, people who don't know you, are actually interested enough in what you're doing to take the time to leave a comment. And it's funny. I did just a little Instagram story about this like 2 nights ago, because I was watching a video from Lewis Howes, and he was doing an interview with a health coach, and I was watching the interview, and it was a good interview, but then I look down and I look in the comments, and it's just like critique after critique. Like, there was nothing new and valuable in here. Gosh, what she has to say is so stupid. Or, man, Lewis, this is too many ads. Like, and this is the thing, that is the price you pay to reach that level of influence. And many of your audience members may look to somebody like Lewis and say, I want to have a podcast like his, or like, and we look at him, we're like, gosh, he's got it made. He's like, you know, he's getting tens of thousands of views. He's getting 100 million downloads on his show. Like, he's doing it. Yes. And that's what happens when you are at that level. So it is a piece of the process, and it is a price that you pay to reach that level of influence. But the thing to remember, and this always helps me, is you're never going to be criticized by somebody more successful than you.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. You will never be criticized that way by somebody more successful than you. Your mentors, the people who are going for it, like, if you saw one of my videos online and maybe you were like, gosh, you really messed that one up, you wouldn't say it in the comments. You would send me a private message, and you would be like, hey, Elyse, I really I saw how much work you put into that last video. Hey, I wanted to offer a piece of, just some thought or some advice here that I think would help you take it to the next level. That's how someone who's actually playing the game alongside with you is going to reach out to you. That's whose advice I care about. The people who are taking the time to sit there and leave something nasty in the comments of someone they don't even know, they're not where you're at. They want to be, and they're mad that they're not, which is why it's never personal about you. They see something in you that they want for themselves, and they don't know how to maturely communicate that, and that's how they express it. So the best thing to do is just have some empathy and be like, you know what, life must be pretty crappy right now that they're willing to take the time to do that. And I don't really engage. Like, if someone's super negative about something, I'll usually just delete it. Mm-hmm. But just realize they're hurting. Like, mm-hmm. They're hurting. And there's a lot of people hurting right now in the world. So having some sympathy that they are a human and they are hurting and they just don't know how to express it. And you reach the point of influence where it's happening for you. So,
yeah, exactly. I love it. You got to celebrate the winners, that you've actually reached the point where somebody's going to take time out of their schedule to try to say bad things about you. Like, hey, if you spend as much time on your business as you did on bashing everybody else, you would be a lot better off, right?
Yeah. This is something in my Facebook group, and I love this. People will share and post when they get their first hater, and they're so excited. They're like, guys, I did it. I got my first hater. And it's like, yes, cheers to many more. You're just beginning, but that's the mindset we have to have, and just, make light of it. It's not something that we need to focus or fixate on.
Mm-hmm. With your experience and everything you've got rock and rolling on, where are some of the, maybe you don't know, I'm just asking, where do you see some of the biggest opportunities out there right now that are kind of going the sideways that maybe people are overlooking when it comes to their brand and visibility? Anything that kind of comes to mind? You're like, oh, people should need to focus more on this, or here's a target audience that you're not seeing being served by any chance?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think it would be, it would be so specific to the individual, but I think a couple things. One is just in terms of delivery of your content. I think probably a lot of your audience has applied for LinkedIn Live, but if you haven't, go ahead and do that, because if your audience is at all on LinkedIn, right now I'm finding I'm getting way more engagement on my live videos, even than on my pre-recorded. LinkedIn says you get about 24 times more engagement when you do a live video on their platform than any other type of content you put out. So, and it's a process, like you mentioned at the beginning, the turnaround time. I think I applied last year and it took 3 months to get approved. I've got some pretty, influential colleagues and clients where it's they're still waiting months. So it doesn't necessarily matter how quote unquote influential you are. I think it's just, it takes a while, and you're like, I put out great content. I've got a big audience.
Maybe they're still on the A's, because I'm C and I've applied 3 times and I'm waiting a year. So maybe they're just going alphabetically. I don't know.
I have no idea. There's literally no rhyme or reason that I know of.
No,
so
sure.
Get your application in now if you haven't, and you can just Google how to apply for LinkedIn Live, and it'll take you to to the link to apply for it. But I think it's also, and again, it's like, I'll use the example of what you've done. I think sometimes we look at our market, and especially for like gosh, this is gonna, I hope so, like a quote unquote boring industry. Like I was talking to a guy the other day who's in HVAC, and I had him on my podcast because he has built a big brand on LinkedIn in HVAC just by doing short, simple thought leadership videos that go out on LinkedIn. And sometimes, somebody may be in that space, or in, even like financial services or HVAC or insurance. And it's like, what am I going to put out there that people are going to find interesting? I think those are some of the biggest opportunities. And it's really just about thinking about, like, what are the questions, again, my customer would have, and then starting to be visible and put yourself out there, just helping and answering. One of my favorite books on this is a book called Utility by Jay Baer, Youtility. I think it's awesome for anyone who's trying to figure out how to build thought leadership in their space, or even in like an unusual space. He talks about, I think it's like a pool cleaning company, and how they leverage content marketing to really grow their business. And there's, the possibilities are endless, because no matter what industry you're in, virtually, like, your customers are online, and it's just a matter of figuring out how to connect with them. So think outside the box, and don't discredit yourself or your industry just because you're in something where it's like, how am I going to create, sexy content for this? It's about being of service and being helpful no matter what space and what industry you're in.
Yeah, that's true, because you never know when somebody's coming across you for the first time. And when you've been in an industry for so long, sometimes the most simplest of questions we just disregard, kind of like lingo, because it's old hat. We think everybody understands that. And then you got to come back, oh, wait, I need to kind of, to say dumb it down, but constantly kind of go back and recap that kind of starting phase to help kind of get people up to ramp up to where they need to be, versus them having to go back and binge everything for 200 plus episodes, right?
Yeah, and I want to riff on that, because I think that is one of the most common mistakes that I see, is you discredit stuff because it's so easy for you. It's like the things that feel so natural and easy for us, we think, why would anybody not know how to do that? I was working with a client literally this morning who she does a couple of different things, but she's built and scaled, a couple 7-figure businesses. And we were looking at her content strategy for her launch, and she was like, I keep doubting and questioning whether anyone's going to care about this, and whether it's going to be helpful to anyone. And a lot of her strategy is about, organizing and getting your business finances in order, and how to do a quarterly review. And she's just one of those like super planned, organized people, and that's her genius. She keeps questioning whether that's going to be valuable. And it was just like, Jill, so many people struggle with this, and you think it's easy because it's easy for you, but this is how you're working in your zone of genius, because it's easy for you. It feels simple, and other people will pay to learn how to do it, because it's not easy for everyone. So don't discredit those things that you've done for so long, you disregard as being special. There are so many people who need your gifts and talents, and you gotta, even in the journey of building your brand, like, you'll end up repeating yourself a lot. You'll end up saying, I'll use the Dave Ramsey example again. It's like, for 20 years, the man has said, debt is dumb, use cash, debt is dumb, use cash, debt is dumb, use cash. But how much does his brand keep growing? And it's simple stuff, but it helps and serves people. And that's what matters. So not discrediting the value that you have to offer through your experience and what comes easily to you, I think is critical and key in making this successful.
I love that. Would you recommend also, if you're trying to dive in and figure out, is surveying your database, surveying or asking a few questions to try to get people's questions on what their biggest struggles are, or what they need the most amount of help with, is kind of your hot list for those videos, those questions to answer throughout the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of ways you can do it. I think once you hone in on who your target client is, it actually doesn't take that long to make that list of questions. So if I'm doing this with a client, like in a one-on-one session, we're getting them built in maybe 15, 20 minutes. It really does, because once you're so clear on who your person is, and it's like, them, you know what questions they would have. And with that being said, if you've got the time to survey and go out and like ask people, yes, 100%. The other thing you can do is just pay attention to what people are asking you a lot about naturally, and maybe on your social media, like what are the questions you're getting, or if you're, if you're starting a Facebook group, have one of the questions that people have to answer in order to join the group. Be like, what's your biggest question about XYZ? And just start just keep compiling that list of questions as you go. But I think when you know who you want to serve, the questions they're going to have you're going to know them. They're going to come naturally because in most cases, you've been doing some work in the space for a while, or you were them, and you know what questions were going through your mind as you were trying to figure out the solution to that problem.
I love that. That's really great stuff there. Question about audio versus video, a podcast. Do you think it makes much more sense to, and I have my beliefs that video will double your audience if you're doing video and audio for stuff like that. But for those of the hardcore, the people that have been podcasting on just audio, do you think that if they just added the video side, it would help them expand their brand and visibility even that much more?
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally when you add another medium, you're going to open yourself up to people who prefer video. And the number right now that I'm hearing is by 2021, like, what is it? Gosh, 82% of all consumer traffic is going to be video. Wow. So when you think about a big opportunity, 82% of people are watching videos to find information. Ideally, you're going to be present on video. But here's the thing, like, do what you're going to do what you're actually going to enjoy, do what you're good at. If video is, if it's just not your thing, like I work with people and helping them get confident on camera, but you have to want it, and you can do it. But if it's just not your gift, or it's going to feel really awkward and forced, I think don't force yourself into doing something that you're like, I'm going to dread every minute of doing this, because then it's just going to it's not going to be worth it. You can double your audience, but it's not going to be worth it, and you're not going to show up as you. So I think in terms of whatever the medium is, whether it's podcasting or blogging or writing or video, like do what you're good at, do what you enjoy. But if you're already doing an audio podcast and it's simple for you to just turn on the video and repurpose, yes, start recording it, because you can turn that into a bunch of additional extra content that does help expand your audience. So in an ideal world, yes, and do what you're actually going to follow through on is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Do what you're actually going to take action and doing is a good thing. Yeah, it makes sense there, definitely for everybody. A question here for you. When you have doubts or you have that inner kind of negative self-talk, which we all experience, there's some things that you do to overcome that, to help you kind of get beyond that and keep rocking and rolling. Because I think we're all launching something. You said before, one of your clients like, is somebody really going to listen to this? Or is this really valuable? Am I going to succeed? How do we, any tips you would give to people to overcoming that?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about this. I think give me another hour. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's a couple of things. One is realizing that everybody struggles with that. So this is one of the interesting things about being behind the scenes with the clients I work with, is some of my clients are like, literally, they're just starting out. It's the side hustle type of thing. And then some of them are like some of the top entrepreneurs in the world. And you don't think that they would struggle with this stuff, but behind the scenes, when you're working with them, you'll hear the same doubts and fears. Like, can I really do that? Do people really, like, this message is so simple. Is this really going to be the thing that people need to hear from me? And you hear that from everyone. So first of all, just know that why me, or the who am I, that is normal regardless of the level you're at. To me, if you're not asking that, it means that you're not leveling up. So I think when you do level up, that's a natural question to ask yourself. And I think that's part of the fun of the process, is you get to grow into the person where you're like, well, why not me? Why not me? A couple other things that help me. I mean, one is, this is just my personal belief, but it helps me, is kind of getting back in tune with, okay, why am I actually doing this work? And having a conversation with God, universe, source, whatever it is you want to call it, just as a reminder that it's not about me. And if this message is flowing through me, it's meant for somebody. I don't need to know who they are. I don't need to know all the details, nor do I need to be in control of exactly how it comes out, because the more I can this is something I try to do every time like before your show, I did this, or anytime I'm about to create my own content, is just kind of pause and just anchor in and say, like I'm a channel, whatever the message is that needs to come out for whoever's watching and listening right now. Please just use me for that. So it makes it a lot easier. It takes a lot of the pressure off, but realizing, and I think it's all in the questions we ask. So the best question is, why not me? Why not me? And we look at the people that we're inspired by. And I would just encourage someone who's struggling with this, like, think of someone who has really changed your life by the content they chose to share, and knowing that they had the same question too going into it of, is this really going to be helpful? Does this really matter? What if they'd let that stop them? And what if they decided not to put themselves out there? And what if they decided, Tony Robbins has said it all, so who's going to listen to me? I think about, for a lot of the women out there, it's like, Rachel Hollis has built such an amazing brand that inspires a lot of women. And what if she had looked at it and said, Tony's already done it, Brendan's already done it, who's going to listen to me? So we have to realize that if we're feeling called to do it and to be visible in that way, it's because there are people who need to hear it just from you, specifically from you. They're not going to hear it if somebody else says that same message, it's just not going to land the same way with them. So whether it's your background, the way you look, your personal take on something, someone out there needs to hear that. And it's not your business to know who that is right now. That's okay. You'll find out, but you have to take the step and put it out there.
Yeah, totally. Aubrey says on here, great point. Loving it. I totally agree that you never know who needs to hear it, and you just got to put it out there. And the right person who's needs to hear it will hear it at the right time too. I think a lot of times we learn more going through something the second or third time, and maybe it takes somebody else telling us the same story or the same advice for the second time before it actually sinks into our hard heads, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's like, it's fun to hear, like, I'll hear something from someone today where it's like, I've heard that before from someone else, but the way he said it or the way she just said it, it just landed right for me. And it's because that person chose to show up, to say what they had to say, to make themselves visible in that way. And the rest will take care of itself. But I really do think being visible, putting yourself out there, making yourself known is the fastest way to achieve your goals for your brand and for your business. And so the sooner you can just get the heck out of your own way and start doing it, the sooner your people are going to win and you're going to win as well. So just remembering that's so key for your success.
Now you've put together kind of a cool 30-day lead generation thing. We were talking about this a few weeks ago, and I meant to ask you before we got on, but you've put something to kind of together. It's kind of a cool thing for our listeners to jump in on, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think sometimes one of the challenges in figuring out how does this whole thing come together of like me building my brand and using content to grow my business, there could be a lot of moving parts. So one of the things I put together several months ago is just like, how do I do my content planning, and what's the whole process that goes along with that. And so that I'd be more than happy for any of your listeners and any of your group members to get in on that. If you just go to my website, ElyseArcher.com, at the very top, there's going to be a bar that gives you a link for it. So it's just ElyseArcher.com, and you can get the link there. But yeah, I think it will help someone kind of have the strategy behind, if you're starting from scratch, how do I do this? How do I build my brand? I do talk a lot about using LinkedIn through that program as well. So yeah, it's totally free. And anyone who would like to kind of learn some of the methods behind the madness of the social media work that I do is welcome to go get that.
Yeah, and I put the link in the chat roll that you gave me, ElyseArcher.com, and also /magnetic was the link that you gave me on that out there for everybody out there. So
yeah,
use that.
So that's actually, So that's for a program where like I teach this more in depth, but what I'll do, I can even grab the link and put it in the chat, or I can just chat it to you for this freebie. Let me actually grab it.
I can
for
pull
you
it up.
right
I've
now
got your
because-
website pulled up here real fast here. So okay.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay. There we go. I
got
see.
it.
Okay. Yeah, joint content.
Yeah.
I got it there.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's really valuable for everybody out there and learn from the best out there. So there we go. There we go. The link is in there. We'll put the description in.
It's not a pretty link.
It's okay. It's all right. It's a
full
link.
Disclosure. It's a link. We are redoing it right now. So full disclosure for all of that. If it's a link, it'll get you what you need. And I think hopefully people will be served by it. So
yeah, well, it's like you go to ElyseArcher.com, you click on it, it'll take you to the right link there for you.
That's it.
Elyse, once again, thank you so much for coming on here. Such great stuff and insight and sharing your counsel and some great ways for people to identify and really help them build their visibility, build their brand better, and be able to identify the right clients and the right listeners for everybody out there. And once again, congratulations so much to you and your hubby. I know you guys have worked hard, and a lot of prayer has gone into what you guys are doing. So congratulations, and look forward to seeing the little baby before too long here for you guys. All righty.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's a blast to connect with you and your audience, and this has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
I thank you for being here. All right, guys and gals, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Mass Media Mastermind podcast. Go out, take advantage of what Elyse offered up. Some great links, some great training there. She's doing an amazing job, and trust me, if you take advice and counsel from her, she knows what she's doing. She can help you take your brand and visibility to a whole nother level. So go out, take some action, everybody, and we'll see you all at the top. Bye.